Ladies and gentlemen, now to present the fifth Dr. Ida S Scudder Humanitarian Oration, Dr. K. Srinath Reddy.
Good evening. Dr. Chandy mentioned that I was passionate and in quite a hurry to deliver this oration even from my hospital bed. That was quite evident from the fact that this is the second time I've rushed to the podium, and therefore the second invitation and the second visit to the podium shows how honored I feel. It's not customary to begin an oration with an apology, but nevertheless I shall do so, breaking convention, because I need to apologize on two grounds. Firstly, for having been unable to be here in August because of a health issue that led me to be hospitalized just 3 days before the event. And secondly, for using a prepared text for this address. Usually I'm much more comfortable in speaking without any prepared text because that ensures spontaneity and also helps to ensure that I do not inflict monotony on an unsuspecting audience. But nevertheless, when I was lying in the hospital bed and nursed a sense of guilt that I was letting down CMC Vellore in not coming here on August 12th, I thought at least I must type out my address so that it could be read by somebody else, just in case the address had to be delivered on August 12th. CMC was gracious enough to give me a second chance, but I thought I must use the text that I had prepared with some modifications. So I shall use the text nevertheless. To be here amidst you this evening in the hallowed precincts of your great institution is truly a moment of immense pleasure and pride. I'm overwhelmed by the honor of being invited to deliver the Dr. Ida Scudder lecture, and I'm overawed by the eminence of those who have delivered the lecture before me. Nevertheless, I'll draw courage and inspiration from the life and grace of Dr. Ida Scudder as I set out to speak about the expansive mandate of medicine in the 21st century. While saluting all health professionals who have rendered selfless service through the care of the sick, I would like you to look at health beyond health care and place human health at the heart of sustainable development. This is a perspective I gained as I transitioned from being a clinical expert to a public health advocate over the course of my professional career. Please permit me to share that perspective with you today. I've been advised by the organizers of this event to weave personal experiences into my talk. So I will reluctantly shed my natural hesitancy to speak about myself in a public lecture and mention some of the events that have actually led me across my life course. Why did I choose to become a doctor in the first place? The mission and message that radiate from the life and legacy of Dr. Ida Scudder have illuminated the world and inspired many generations of health professionals. My mother, too, was among them. While it was my father's lawyerly presentation of why the medical profession was one assured way of my remaining useful to society lifelong, my mother was the role model who embodied the nobility of that profession. She was an obstetrician and gynecologist who served as an honorary consultant in a large government hospital in Hyderabad, and that hospital served the poor. She was also an unsalaried honorary professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the Osmania Medical College. In her evening clinic, she would never charge poor patients, and on many an occasion gave them money to travel back home. At the hospital, she was one of the few doctors who chose to operate on many cases of vesicovaginal fistula with skill and patience, empathizing with the unfortunate women who were abandoned by families and were ridden by self-loathing as they dribbled urine uncontrollably from their genital passage. She said the least she could do was to restore their dignity to them. That empathy for fellow human beings on an even grander scale was the hallmark of Dr. Scudder's professional life. She empathized with people of a different culture in a faraway land and devoted her life to their service. What a noble reminder of the indivisible nature of the human family at this troubled time when sectarian, hypernationalistic, and xenophobic madness parades in different parts of the world, spreading hatred and not love for fellow human beings. My father was a voracious reader with an insatiable appetite for reading across many disciplines. Our house was full of books that included the biographies of doctors who, like Dr. Scudder, traveled far to devote their lives to the service of people in other countries. Albert Schweitzer, Norman Bethune, Sharad Kotnis, to name a few. They were among my schoolboy heroes as I wandered around the home library. As a medical student and later as a young doctor, my pantheon of heroes grew larger, with Rudolf Virchow, Bernard Lown, and several others joining the list. Today, I'll add words from some of those heroes to mine as I speak of the road that medicine must take to serve society even better. It was well said several centuries ago that the duty of a physician is to cure some, relieve most, and comfort all. That call for empathy signals that the hallmark of a physician is not merely clinical competence, but also a combination of care, concern, courtesy, compassion, commitment, and considerate communication. As Albert Schweitzer said, it is our duty to remember at all times and anew that medicine is not only a science, but also the art of letting our own individuality interact with the individuality of the patient. Indeed, compassion and commitment are the defining attributes of nobility in a profession that humanity has placed on a pedestal for thousands of years. However, our compassion and commitment meant only to define our desirable attitudes towards individuals whom we label as patients, or must we also extend those virtues to our relationship to the larger society we reside in? Do we empathize and identify with all of humanity, all life forms, or even the whole planet that we call home? I would like to posit that our current understanding of health and medicine calls on the medical profession to radiate compassion and commitment across the wide spectrum that extends from the well-being of an individual to the welfare of the whole globe, from pulse to planet, as it were. It is that cordless extension which connects clinical medicine to public health and public health to sustainable development. Recognition of that connectivity also underlies my own journey as a health professional. While clinical competence can be instilled by training, the life spring of compassion and commitment is a sense of connectivity that becomes an integral part of the psyche. Only when we connect with our patient in an empathetic bond will we display compassion and commitment. That ennobling spirit of connectivity must now extend beyond individuals to embrace the wider world. I believe that it's imperative for the medical profession to develop such broadband connectivity if it has to faithfully fulfill its mission of promoting, protecting, and preserving human health. Otherwise, medicine would remain incomplete in its precept and inadequate in its practice. This is not mere spouting of utopian idealism. Such connectivity arises not only from the moral moorings of essential human values, but also from sound, contemporary scientific knowledge, which reveals how human health is built across many links that extend from the microcosmos of the microbiome that exists within our bodies to the macrocosmos of the planetary ecosystem that surrounds and nurtures us. Therefore, as believers and practitioners of science, we must also ensure that that scientific knowledge is reflected in the way we look at the world. The prescription for human survival and well-being, and also the role that medicine plays as an enabler, are defined by the need for human beings, both as individuals and as a collective, to live in harmony with our internal and external environments. Let us begin to explore these connections by examining what defines the biology of an individual. We now recognize, with great surprise and some humility, that only 10% of the cells that make up our body are really human. As I stand here, I'm only 10% human. The rest 90% are made of microbes who cohabit in and on our body and regularly participate in our physiology and may occasionally contribute to our pathology. They collectively constitute the microbiome. Our 21,000 genes are complemented by 4.4 million genes of our body's microbiome to form the supergenome that drives our body's functions across life. The microbiome is an ally which helps us to keep healthy by supporting nutrition and aiding immunity. Changes in the microbiome brought about by what we consume as foods, toxins, antibiotics, or other drugs are now known to influence our health and disease patterns, from childhood malnutrition to adult obesity, and from inflammatory bowel disease to diabetes. Now it's being even linked to autism. Knowledge of the microbiome leads us to redefine our identity and reconsider our self-image as autonomous individuals proudly standing aloft and aloof at the top of the evolutionary pyramid. As the guru of microbiome research, Professor Jeffrey Gordon, says, this perception of the microbial side of ourselves is giving us a new view of our individuality, a new sense of our connection to the microbial world, a sense of legacy of our personal interactions with our family and environment early in life. It is causing us to pause and consider that there might be another dimension to human evolution. So that is the microenvironment I was talking about, with which we have to live in harmony. What about the rest of it? Our health is also determined by the society around it, around us. It is now well recognized that many of the determinants of health lie beyond the immediate biology, beliefs, and behavior of the individual and are greatly conditioned by social circumstances, ranging from water and sanitation to food systems and trade policies. Let me cite the story of one of my great heroes, Rudolf Virchow, who is regarded as the father of social medicine. Those of you who have studied pathology would know Virchow's triad and role in thrombosis and so on. But this great German pathologist, anthropologist, and statesman of the 19th century was sent by the Emperor of Prussia to investigate an outbreak of typhus in Upper Silesia. Virchow came back not with a medical prescription, but with a damning indictment of the prevailing social conditions. He called for reduction in poverty, abolition of feudal privileges, and greater democracy, talking about how poverty was actually responsible for the spread of the epidemic. On being criticized by the royal court, he declared his belief that physicians are the natural attorneys of the poor. To quote Virchow on the cause of disease, quote, "Do we not always find the diseases of the populace traceable to defects in society? If disease is an expression of individual life under unfavorable circumstances, then epidemics must be indicative of mass disturbances." He went on to say that some of the epidemics were mass artificial disturbances of mass culture. What Virchow said of typhus and social causes then is now true of mass marketing of tobacco or transnational trade in unhealthy products, like unhealthy food products. The domain of public health has to include all factors which influence health at the population level and ultimately impact on the health of individuals. So even road safety and gun control become legitimate areas for public health advocacy and action. From health promotion and disease prevention at community level to disease and risk factor surveillance, assurance of access to essential drugs, and organization and evaluation of health services, the mandate of public health has grown in expanse and impact from the days of the Humanitarian movement in Europe. Poverty and ill health have a bidirectional relationship in individuals. We know that those who are poor are more likely to fall ill, and those who fall ill are likely to also become more poor because of the effect of their ill health on their productivity, employment, and earning capacity. Similarly, per capita gross national income, as well as interpersonal income inequality, have a bidirectional relationship with health indicators at the population level. The Millennium Preston curve shows that life expectancy of populations rises as per capita GDP rises to around $5,000. Those who have low life expectancy and low per capita incomes in the country do show a fairly sharp response to a rising national income, per capita income. But then around $5,000, it plateaus off. However, at any level of per capita GDP, countries with higher levels of income and social inequality fare worse than those with lower levels of inequality, and this happens even at the same level of per capita income. Indeed, this is not only true of the poor, but also of the rich in those countries. You may say, okay, the poor are faring badly because of income inequality, but the rich must be well off. As Richard Wilkinson and Kate Prickett documented in their book, The Spirit Level, the rich who live in countries with high levels of income inequality fare worse on several health indicators, including life expectancy, than their rich counterparts in more equal societies, even at the same level of per capita income. The rich in skyscrapers cannot escape the effects of poor sanitation in their neighborhood slums, nor can they evade the evidence that desperate poverty breeds. Therefore, inequality hurts everybody in society. Even as we celebrate India's accelerated economic development, we must be mindful of the growing inequality and be wary of its adverse effects on the health of all sections of our society. We also recognize that apart from family income, factors like education, nutrition, social status, and gender play a great role in conditioning health across the life course. Merely talking about equality of opportunity in adult life is meaningless if multiple disadvantages have been heaped on in earlier life. In the words of early 20th century English economist and theologian Tawney, the phrase equality of opportunity is merely decorous drapery when used to camouflage social injustice. We now know that malnutrition in the womb leads not only to poor health and loss of cognitive potential in childhood, but also to susceptibility to a host of adult diseases. So, social circumstances do shape individual health through many pathways ranging from epigenetic influences on gene expression to deprived access to health care. It is the task of the medical profession to link biological aberrations of disease with the contributory social causes. In the contemporary world, factors such as urbanization, trade, transnational transport of humans, animals, and goods, voluntary or forced migration and conflict play a major role in shaping the human health condition. At the community level, protection of public places and indoor workplaces from tobacco smoke, provision of safe pedestrian pathways and designated cycling lanes, as well as green community spaces and safeguards against air pollution are essential public health measures. I know what I'm talking of coming from Delhi, which is full of smog for the last couple of months. Enlightened policy which promotes public health is therefore an essential and critical ally of personal health. Even at the more intimate personal level, participation in social networks or social isolation influence both physical and mental health. The old adage, "No man is an island," is especially true of human health. So that was about the human beings and their interaction with the rest of human society. What about our connection with the animal and the plant world? In studying our connection to the animal and plant world, we have only now begun to recognize the profound effects of animal-human interaction on zoonotic infections and the devastating impact of deforestation and climate change on health and nutrition. It is not accidental that the vast majority of infectious disease outbreaks in the past 50 years have been zoonotic, crossing from different animal species to humans. SARS, MERS, H1N1, H5N1, all of them are Ebola, all of them are examples. This is not because animals have suddenly become malevolent towards human beings, but because we have set up conveyor belts for transmission of microbes from wildlife to captive veterinary populations, and from then on to human habitat. This we do through extensive deforestation that releases hitherto confined viruses and vectors into our communities, through industrial-scale factory farming of livestock and animals for our food, and rapid mass transportation of humans across the world. This permits viruses to multiply and mutate with recurrent threat of dangerous pandemics. At the same time, profligate use of antibiotics is creating many forms of antimicrobial resistance on a global scale. Our connectivity with the external world grows in complexity as our ill-considered actions recoil on the internal world of our bodily health. As Scottish-born American naturalist John Muir aptly remarked, quote, "When you tug at anything, you will find it tied to everything else in the universe," unquote. Climate change, too, has a profound impact on health. Apart from global warming, which leads to a surge in summer heat-related deaths, we have natural disasters like floods and droughts to contend with. As humans wilt in the warm weather, mosquitoes multiply and become athletic, climbing to higher altitudes. Agriculture will suffer, with South Asia and Africa expected to have a 10% reduction in crop yields for every 1 degree further rise in temperature. So where is food security? Both staples and non-staples will have diminished nutritional quality, and water will be in short supply for agriculture as well as human consumption. Acidification of oceans threatens marine life, and fish will become less available for our diet. Even as we belatedly acknowledge that planetary health and human health are intricately and inexorably interconnected, our actions are imperiling the planet through anthropogenic climate change. It is clear that health and nutrition must be centrally placed in the integrated framework of sustainable development if we have to survive and thrive as a species. Climate change and health must become a part of the health professional education and advocacy. We as physicians and defenders of life cannot remain passive observers when the issue is one of human survival. Our profession calls on us not only to strive for the survival of an individual, our patient, but also of all of humanity. Another hero of mine, Bernard Lown, taught me that lesson. He is a distinguished American cardiologist, still very vibrant at the age of 94 in Boston. He invented the first ever external cardiac defibrillator for reviving a person from cardiac arrest through an electric shock. That technology has saved so many lives in the past few decades. He also became the founder leader of the International Physicians for Prevention of Nuclear War, IPPNW, which won him the Nobel Prize for Peace in 1985. In the words of Lown's address to the first IPPNW Congress in March 1981, quote, Social systems do not endure for eternity. Only life can lay claim to uninterrupted continuity. This continuity is sacred. We physicians who shepherd human life from birth to death are aware of the resiliency, courage, and creativeness that human beings possess. We have an abiding faith in the concept that humanity can control what humanity creates. This perception provides optimistic purpose in reversing the direction of humankind's potential tragic destiny. That was at the time when the threat of nuclear war was very high. What Lown said then of nuclear annihilation is now also true of extreme climate change. We as physicians must add our voice to the call for sanity and advocate effective steps for mitigation of climate change, since it's a matter of human survival, a cause we represent every day. Otherwise, there may come a time when no human being will exist on this earth, no child will ever again walk on this earth, and no one to ever remember that someone ever did. To conclude, the diverse but interconnected determinants of our health, well-being, and very survival extend from molecules to markets and connect us to the physical, chemical, and collective biological features of the planet which we transiently inhabit during our individual lives. As we recognize this, our role as doctors gets redefined and extends beyond our duty to provide competent care to ailing individuals. That does remain our primary duty, but there is an extension that we must also recognize. We get a much more holistic appreciation of health as it applies to persons and populations, even as we study science at its most reductionist precision. By recognizing that the spectrum of science is reductionist in content, but holistic in context, we learn to act across the whole expanse of human health. Even as we apply ourselves to the care of individuals whose health we strive to preserve or improve, we must respond to the need for public health policies and actions that protect and promote health at the population level. We will not then be inert when tobacco control is debated or stay silent when air pollution is discussed. We will demonstrate social solidarity in demanding universal health coverage so that everybody can get essential health care with financial protection. And we will also exhibit social solidarity in demanding worldwide access to essential drugs, vaccines, and life-saving technologies. We will not remain disengaged when collective societal action is required to counter climate change, and will call for an end to the scattered wars that waste valuable lives and senseless sectarian violence that is even now killing, maiming, and destroying the lives of millions. Am I asking too much of medicine by stretching its mission so wide? There is no danger, in my opinion, that medicine will abandon or dilute its primary commitment to protect the health of the individual patient by extending its attention to such a broad agenda of action. On the other hand, understanding and acknowledging the many determinants of health will enable us to become better care providers and counselors, even in individual care. Recognizing this broadband connectivity and respecting its complexity will teach us humility and help us to abandon the paternalistic and physician-centric pattern of clinical care that deifies the doctor and demeans the patient as an object. We will no longer fight across the divisions of narrow subspecialties when we accept the enormity of interdependence that lies within and beyond our bodies. Truly, the lifeline of human health extends from the pulse to the planet. When we recognize that, we will work to promote health in all of its dimensions: basic research, clinical medicine, public health practice, and public policy. Indeed, compassion and commitment are at their noblest when the beneficiaries of our action are nameless and faceless, without even the immediate emotional gratification that comes to us through personal contact with the patient we directly care for. We will therefore not set limits to our compassion and commitment, but will amplify and extend those virtues to all of society, to all those who are alive anywhere, and even the future generations to come. As we do that, we will live up to the humanitarian legacy of Dr. Ida Scudder, to whose chosen profession we subscribe, and whose unrestricted love for humanity we must aspire to emulate in our own professional and personal lives. That would be medicine at its best. But that thought is not new. To quote again my hero, Rolf Virchow, quote, "Should medicine ever fulfill its great ends, it must enter into the larger political and social life of our time. It must indicate the barriers which obstruct the normal completion of the life cycle and remove them. Should this ever come to pass, medicine, whatever it may then be, will become the common good of all." That was in the 19th century. It remains a call to action even in the 21st century. Thank you once again for this opportunity and attention that have done me great honor. Thank you.